Nuremberg Zoo, or as it's called in German, Tiergarten Nürnberg, is one of the biggest and best zoos in Germany and all of Europe. Yes, it did not quite make the cut for my personal top 10, but it's probably in my top 20. So today I want to show you why I love this zoo so much, what you get to see here, and why it deserves even more international attention. But first of all, as a German, I really want to know which zoos from Germany would you like to see featured here? Let me hear your wishes in the comments, and also tell me, are you also interested in smaller parks or just the big ones? The fact that Nuremberg is definitely one of the big ones is evident from the size alone. Because, like I mentioned already, it's huge. The area covers 60-70 hectares or 170 acres, making it the largest zoo I have covered here so far. However, we will soon surpass that, so remember, if you're interested in zoos, it's worth subscribing. The last time I was in Nuremberg, all the houses were closed due to the corona pandemic, so the first place I visited was the so-called Naturkundehaus. In addition to the zoo school, there is a large number of terrariums on the ground floor, so there are plenty of reptiles and I think also amphibians to see here, but there are also tarantulas and insects, and this large enclosure is also home to dwarf mangooses and Deccan hornbills, a really cool mix of animals, which fortunately also have an outdoor enclosure. For this reason alone, the almost hidden house should not be overlooked, but there is also an exhibition worth seeing on the upper floor. It's all about bionics, the application of technology to create systems or devices that mimic or enhance the function of living organisms. So, technology based on nature, which is a fascinating topic. Moving on, past this shop, we are greeted by the eastern grey kangaroos, who share their quite spacious enclosure with emus. And as you can see here, they had tiny cute little chicks. Opposite is the giraffe house, which dates back to 1964 and no longer meets today's standards and requirements in Germany. So the giraffes moved out temporarily in autumn of 2024, so that now the house and enclosure can be extended and modernized. Inside, the giraffes will have a running area of more than 200 square meters and 3 boxes measuring 35 to 58 square meters. This will triple the size of the indoor enclosures. Overall, the modernization of the heritage-protected building is expected to cost 6.7 million euros and will also include a gallery from which the giraffes can be admired at eye level. And in the plans, it also looks as if a high path will then lead around the island of the squirrel monkeys, which is also very promising. Right next to the giraffe's outdoor enclosure, you will find another exciting animal combination. Meerkats and yellow mongooses live together here. Passing the visually unappealing enclosure for crowned lemurs, the next stop are the Ginny baboons, which have recently caused quite a fuss. The enclosure is currently heavily overcrowded. I think we can all agree 45 animals in an enclosure designed for 25 is quite a problem. And since there was apparently no other facility that could provide them a new home, the zoo announced last year that it would have to kill some baboons as part of population management. This would probably have been shrugged off in other countries such as Denmark, but in Germany there was a huge outcry from animal rights activists. I don't want to go too deeply into such a complex topic as population management, so let's leave it at this point. So far, no animals have been killed, but none have been transferred either, so the problem still exists. We continue to the so-called Mediterraneum, a wonderful enclosure for animals from the Mediterranean region. It's a shared home for tortoises, lizards, and European ground squirrels. The latter can also be discovered throughout the park, as they inhabit the meadow and forest areas of the zoo quite naturally. Of course, this does not apply to the bat-eared foxes, but their enclosure is also very beautiful and well designed. Nevertheless, we have now arrived in the part of the zoo that I personally like the least. The area around the old monkey house looks relatively old-fashioned. The gibbon's enclosure in particular is furnished in the best possible way, but the end result is still not very appealing for either visitors or animals. At first glance, this also applied for the gorillas, where the interiors look like they are straight out of the 70s or 80s. Strictly visually, the gorillas won't mind, but it just doesn't look nice anymore. And the outdoor enclosures don't look much better at first either, so you could be forgiven for thinking that everything here is terrible. But it's not. On the other side, there has been a 1,300 square meter outdoor enclosure since the 90s, which has considerably improved and enlarged the gorilla's habitat. Yet I have to say, from a visitor's perspective, I don't like the result. It's still an old enclosure that has been more or less pragmatically extended, so the overall impression is just not cohesive. In fact, it just feels like a mess. Although the building has been renovated several times, the original structure dates back to 1939, when the zoo had to move here. In the house, there are a number of aquariums opposite the gorillas' indoor enclosures, and hyacinth macaques are also kept here. The gorillas have been socialized with Barbary macaques, which is interesting but also strangely out of place. Oh, and one of the old monkey enclosures is now home to terrapins, and so it all feels that one makeshift solution after another has created quite a mishmash. And maybe you think I'm being quite pedantic here, but there are a few reasons why I won't let this slide. First and foremost, this area doesn't fit in with the otherwise coherent overall picture of the zoo, and also there are not many monkeys living in Nuremberg, and there isn't another aquarium either, which makes this comparatively weak area all the more noticeable. Or to be even more frank, if they ever completely overhaul this area here, Nuremberg would be a contender for the top 10 zoos in Europe for me. So on the bright side, from now on I can finally start gushing, at least for the most part. Starting with the Manatee House, a small but beautiful tropical hall that opened in 2011. As the name suggests, you can watch manatees here, but there are also other inhabitants such as the white-faced sakis, there are long-nosed bats, yellow-spotted Amazon river turtles, and butterflies that flutter through the hall. In total, there are 45 different animal species to be found. In addition, 50 different tropical plant species grow here, creating a wonderful tropical atmosphere with their dense greenery. And with temperatures up to 32 degrees and a humidity of 70%, it almost feels like you're really in a flooded Amazon forest. The artificial riverbed in which the manatees swim covers 350 square meters, half of the total area of 700 square meters, and contains 700,000 liters of water. And since it was a great pleasure to watch the animals here, I didn't mind dodging a heavy rain shower for a while. But you may already be wondering, is there no underwater view at all? Yes, there is, here in this so-called blue salon. Two large glass panes give you a wonderful view of the riverbed. A great sight that allows you to observe the manatees from a completely different perspective. But as you can already see, there are also some fish swimming around here, such as the enormous tambaquis. Opposite is another huge glass pane through which you can look into the pool of the Dolphin lagoon. This is the name of the outdoor dolphin enclosure, also opened in 2011, which complements the old dolphinarium, which can no longer be visited. The keeping of dolphins, or more precisely bottlenose dolphins here, is of course a major point of contention. Marine mammals in zoos are controversial even among zoo fans, which is precisely why I shot several interviews here in Nuremberg for my planned documentary on the subject. I talked to the head zookeeper and the curator in charge, as well as the veterinarian. And I can tell you this much, they are all convinced that they can offer the dolphins a good life here. But this is currently being put to the test. A scientific study is in progress here in Nuremberg regarding the welfare of the dolphins, and I'm sure if the results should be positive, they will be recognized by everyone. I mean, that everyone remains objective in this discourse is just as certain as that Germans could never do sarcasm. But all jokes aside, I certainly don't want to tell you how you should think about this topic. So let's focus on the facts, but of course I'd also like to share a few thoughts. The lagoon comprises a total of 5,400 cubic meters of seawater and is divided into 6 pools that can be connected in different ways. At its deepest point, the dolphins can dive to a depth of 7 meters, and it is here at the largest pool that the panoramic window offers spectacular views of the diving dolphins. Additionally, there is also the aforementioned Old Dolphinarium, where the dolphins still have indoor pools at their disposal, above all, of course, the old demonstration pool. And then there is also the Old Dolphinarium 2 behind the scenes, with 937 cubic meters of water, and of course there are separation pools for mother animals with offspring or sick animals. I realize that anyone who categorically opposes dolphins in captivity will not be impressed by these figures. If you think like that, no tank is ever big enough anyway, and I don't even want to presume to determine at what size tanks are sufficient for dolphins, but I am certain that the mental health of the animals is primarily determined on how well the animals are kept occupied. Dolphins are social animals, so a group can naturally engage themselves to a certain extent. In addition, the dolphins here in Nuremberg live together with sea lions, which during my interview in the middle of the lagoon curiously inspected my equipment. And dolphins are also very curious animals, so you can fascinate them with objects and toys, especially if you change them up a bit. Also, the training of the dolphins is not only done to offer humans an exciting and hopefully educational show. Just like with many dogs, for example, training and the associated activities promote mental and, of course, physical fitness. I know that for many of you these are the usual arguments and thoughts, and I myself am not 100% certain that dolphins can live a good life in zoos and aquariums. I am very curious to see what I think about this when I have hopefully completed my documentation in a year or two. But I can definitely say right now, compared with the only other dolphinarium in Germany, which is in Duisburg, I definitely prefer Nuremberg. From a purely visual point of view, the Dolphin Lagoon is really beautifully designed, although there are some reconstruction works going on right now. And the presentation is obviously a highlight for many visitors and thrills young and old alike. Can this also sensitize people to the protection of dolphins? Does it make a difference? You can argue about that forever, but in any case, Nuremberg Zoo is involved in research projects and is actively committed to the protections of dolphins in nature as well. Together with the organization Yaku Pacha, which was founded by curator Lorenzo van Fersen, the zoo recently celebrated a milestone with the rehabilitation of a critically endangered Franciscan dolphin. Leaving the Dolphin Lagoon behind, we immediately arrive at the next highlight, the Desert House. This is actually a converted hippo house that has been shining in its new function since 2018. As you can see, they didn't fill it with a bunch of enclosures. Instead, the entire house is a habitat for free-ranging and free-flying animals, and visitors are right in the middle of it all. So you better watch your step, because there are duck beetles crawling everywhere, and you can watch them up close as they roll their iconic dong balls around the place. Various desert lizards also live here, and fat sand rats scurry across the path. And then there are also some little birds to discover, so it really feels like a living and breathing space. And even if the result is perhaps not quite as immersive in comparison, the house reminds me very pleasantly of the biome concept of Burgos Zoo Arnhem. So yeah, I loved observing the animals here, especially when I was all alone. There are also a few outdoor enclosures at the house where you can find tortoises, for example. And the thematically appropriate design extends to the nearby enclosures for other desert dwellers, specifically the highly endangered Adaxes and Somali wild donkeys. Oh wait, they went for the other name for donkeys. So they are actually called Somali wild ass. Yeah, sure, English language. That's a wild ass decision. But, I mean, anyway, now the park opens up and we walk along the lower edge of the zoo past two large ponds where there are plenty of waterfowl to be discovered. This includes pelicans, for example, while the flamingos live in their own separate enclosure. And then there are also large enclosures for cranes here. All in all, a really beautiful area close to nature that invites you to slow down and take a deep breath, precisely because, in my experience at least, there are also no large crowds to be expected here. However, there is also a cute park railway that takes you from the giraffe enclosure all the way to the petting zoo, which we also reach next on foot. Petting zoo, however, is a bit of an understatement here, as it's actually a whole farm area with many different farm animals that you can meet either in the open air or in the stable buildings. From cute little rabbits to alpacas and dwarf zebus, there is a whole lot to discover here. And thanks to the restaurant and large playground, this area is the ideal place for families to take a short break from wandering through the extensive zoo. But that also means we still have a lot of ground to cover, so we'd better get on with it. The route continues past spacious hoofed animal enclosures where we can observe Bactrian camels, Przewalski's horses, and bison. A small highlight are the red forest duikers, which are rarely seen in Europe. In Germany, for instance, there are currently only 4 zoos that keep them. And as you might have seen already, here in Nuremberg they live together with blue cranes. Gravy zebras and Chequeran peccaries also live here surrounded by dense greenery, so here too the park can benefit from its natural environment. And you may have already realized, if you like hoofed animals, you'll get your money's worth here. If we follow the path back, now above the large ponds, we also pass an enclosure for African steppe animals. In addition to ostriches, there are also common elands and Grant's zebras, which also had 2 young foals. Cape buffaloes are another unusual species that can only be found in 12 European zoos, in Germany elsewhere only in Berlin Tierpark. And while the yellowback duikers can at least be seen in 4 zoos in Germany, otherwise you can only find them in Zooparc des Bouval in France, and that's it for Europe. Scottish Highland cattle, on the other hand, are a dime a dozen by comparison, but I'm always so happy to see those shaggy animals. And I always enjoy seeing Indian rhinoceroses too. In Nuremberg they live in the heritage-protected former elephant house, which has not been home to elephants since 2007. Following the addition of the Winter Garden, which now serves as a visitors area, the house is relatively large and well furnished, but maybe a little dark. On the other hand, I have absolutely nothing to criticize about the outer enclosure on the slope. There are 3 separable areas of 1,100, 1,300 and 3,500 square meters, which the rhinos share with Visayan vortipigs. A combination that is becoming more and more common and has also been adopted by Berlin Zoo in recent years. The enclosures have a variety of natural substrates and are also well equipped in every other respect. And from a visitor's point of view, you can enjoy a very good view of the area both in the lower and the upper sections. And so we also make our way upwards. Nuremberg Zoo has some some steep paths, so you might want to study the map beforehand if you want to avoid them, as the rest of the grounds are located on a hill, the so-called Schmausenbuck. The zoo has been located here since 1939, when the Nazis bulldozed the original zoo for their party rally grounds. Great, typical self-indulgent Nazi stuff. In retrospect, however, the relocation certainly did not harm the zoo. As already mentioned, the park benefits greatly from its natural area in the middle of the Lorenzer Reichswald forest. Particularly iconic is here the old red sandstone on which, for example, the ibex clamber in their enclosure. But the predator enclosures are even more special. They were built back in 1939 in a former quarry, molded almost naturally into the cliffs. Visitors can marvel at lions and tigers across a moat in front of the impressive rocky backdrop without any visual barriers. This alone is absolutely brilliant, especially in the context of the time, but the predator house is even more ingeniously designed. You reach it through a tunnel 20 meters deep into the rock, where the house, with a diameter of 30 meters and a height of 11 meters, is completely hidden. And I think you'll agree with me, the view inside is simply spectacular. However, it has only looked like this since the renovation was completed in 2009. Originally, the interior of the building was much less attractive and more rustically designed. In addition, 5 different predators used to live here at times, some of which had no access to the outdoor facilities. A renovation was therefore desperately needed. The former individual compartments were broken up and placed together for the animals. In addition, the corridors for cats and keepers were roofed over to make this elevated area accessible to the animals as well. This allowed the space for the cats to be tripled. Bars have also been replaced by glass panes, nets have been stretched over them so that you can hear and smell the big cats as well. The enclosure floor has been adapted to suit the animals, and instead of boring bricks, partly natural and partly artificial rocks now form a magnificent backdrop. Some smaller songbirds now also fly through the hall. Originally, they even had tried this with Egyptian vultures, but it was too stressful for them with the large crowds of visitors. Be that as it may, even with the smaller birds, the hall here is very lively, even when the Asian lions and Siberian tigers are in their outdoor enclosures. These are well equipped for the animals. Whilst I have only ever seen the lions sleepy here, I have been able to observe both the swimming and climbing skills of the tigers. Unfortunately, I think the enclosures are a little small and should be expanded in the future. There would certainly be room for this here, as there are quite large grassy areas on the other side of the visitor's path. Here too, however, you have to see how you can reconcile this with the monument protection, and it would probably be very expensive again. I mean, the easiest and cost-efficient solution would be to get rid of the lions and give their enclosures to the tigers as well. My dream would be to build an elevated path here in the place of and at the same height as the current visitor's path, under which the enclosure then could be extended at a lower level. In addition to the 2 big cat enclosures, there's also a very nice enclosure for fishing cats on the left-hand side of the rock wall. At first I thought I wouldn't see them again, but then the cat just sat perfectly posing in a tree. Nice. Right next to it is a very lovely walk-in aviary where you can observe northern bald ibises, among others. And opposite are the maned wolves, which I was at least able to take a brief look at in 2021. Back then I also had really good luck with the yellow-throated martens, but I've seen them again now. Their enclosure is very spacious and designed to be close to nature, while visitors can see them very well through glass panes and from a vantage point. The predators area is then completed by another very large natural enclosure for lynxes, but instead of continuing here, we turn back and inspect a partly very new area. Here in the middle section of the zoo, some enclosures are currently being merged and remodeled. The new focus here being mainly endangered Asian animals. The former reindeer enclosure has already been completely redesigned and is now home to water buffaloes. And I think this 1000 square meter enclosure has turned out really beautifully and hopefully gives a good preview of what the redesign of this entire area will look like. Mishmitakins, Visayan spotted deer and nilgais will continue to be on display here in the future, while I can well imagine that the European bisons will have to make way. The snow leopards, on the other hand, are no longer to be seen. Last summer, the tomcat Indra had to be put to sleep at an advanced age. The snow leopard enclosure here has always left me somewhat conflicted. Even though the natural rocks created the right ambience here, the enclosure left a lot to be desired, especially in terms of verticality. I mean, a zoo with such large natural slopes offers ideal conditions for a really good snow leopard enclosure, and even if this certainly wasn't terrible, it was disappointing in that respect. However, if the enclosure were to be reoccupied with palace cats, for instance, it would have enormous potential. In keeping with the theme, the enclosure for red pandas now follows, which can be viewed from both below and above from a bridge. From here, you can also easily spot the cute pandas in the trees. On the other side of the bridge, black box were still living during my visit, but they have since moved. Maybe that means that the Bavaria sheep enclosure next to it has been extended, but I'm not sure. What I do know for sure is that now another highlight awaits us in the form of the Aqua Park. As the name might already suggest, it's a water landscape that opened in 2001 and is home to penguins, sea lions and seals, as well as polar bears, otters and beavers. Unfortunately, I did not get to see the latter in their beautiful natural habitats, but at least a cute family of ducks had made themselves at home here. However, I have no shortage of good footage of the polar bears. As I was also filming here for a documentary about polar bears in zoos, I even went backstage and visited the animals in their stables, which they can always use as a retreat. And yes, I also fed the bears, as you can see here, and that was an experience I won't forget in a hurry. There are currently 3 females living in Nuremberg, although there are only 2 separable outer enclosures. Fortunately, this is only a theoretical problem so far, as the animals get on well enough with each other. Both enclosures also benefit visually from the sandstone cliffs, which not only serve as a natural barrier, but also give the animals the opportunity to climb a little. But the enclosures are also equipped with various other natural substrates, and of course both have a large water area for swimming. These enclosures have existed in their current form since 2004, when the old enclosure on the left was renovated and equipped with an underwater viewing area, which of course offers an absolutely exciting perspective for visitors who can now also watch the bears diving. But more importantly, the area was extended to the right and the additional stable building we just saw was added. In total, the enclosures offer the polar bears 1,700 square meters of land and 600 square meters of water. In my opinion, the newer enclosure on the right is decent both in structure and size, while the older enclosure is significantly inferior in comparison. But from a certain size, keeping the animals occupied is of course much more important for their well-being. Unfortunately, polar bears are very susceptible to behavioral problems, which can also be seen from time to time in Nuremberg. However, the animals exhibited this behavior from the very beginning and did not develop it in Nuremberg. If you follow the path by the underwater view of the polar bears, you can also look into the penguin and seal pools, and then you can theoretically do a whole loop around their enclosure and come back at the polar bears. But we don't have time for running in circles, so let's continue. Well, unfortunately there was still a building site in my way. The Climate Forest Trail was only opened after my visit in summer 24. So unfortunately I can't offer you my own impressions and footage, but from a distance it really looks like a new highlight. Quite literally too, as the 450-meter long high-altitude trail takes you through the treetops at a height of up to 20 meters. Originally, you were even supposed to be able to see leopards here. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but reindeers, owls, adders and some amphibians have moved in, and of course you should also take a look at the completely natural flora and fauna, which you can discover here from a completely different perspective. There are also various play areas and educational elements designed to sensitize visitors to climate change, the forest as an ecosystem, and the importance of nature conservation. So let's put it this way, I'm already looking forward to exploring the trail on my next visit. All that remains for us now is the upper path back towards the exit, but that has still a lot to offer. Firstly, there's the cheetah enclosure, which doesn't knock my socks off but is pretty solid. On the other hand, I'm really enthusiastic about this walk-in aviary, which once again impresses with its natural rocky backdrop. Bearded vultures, black storks, alpine marmots and rock pigeons live here, an exciting combination, and in this setting it is of course even more fun to watch the animals in peace and quiet, so that I not only count this aviary among my favorite enclosures in Nuremberg, I would even at least put it on my shortlist of my favorite aviaries in general. The other birds of prey aviaries that now follow are more boring in comparison, at least as far as the design is concerned. But Andean condors live here, and if you find that exciting, wait until you see the harpy eagle. Nuremberg is one of 4 European zoos where you can marvel at these impressive birds of prey. Behind the scenes they are also bred here, and the European Stockbook is being set up currently. If all goes well, we will soon be able to see them more often in Europe again, and thereby create an additional reserve population outside of South America. A few meters further on, a babirusa scurried through its enclosure, while the outer enclosure of the Asian tapir next to it was completely empty. But at least I was able to see them in the house, even though they weren't exactly photogenic in their boxes at the back. Admittedly, the house is generally a bit old-fashioned, but I still like the atmosphere here somehow. But of course, with a modernized design, more could be made out of these tanks, in which not only fish swam, but also a duck. And wouldn't you know it, the Philippine duck is actually a small rarity again. Behind the tapir house, the path leads through the forest above the predator enclosures, but while you can also get a good view of the lynx enclosure from above, and wait, yeah, I really got him. Didn't expect that, to be honest. But where was I? Oh yes. The other predator enclosures are not really viewable from above, which might be a bit of a shame, but whatever. So the path only leads past a few owl aviaries here, back down the mountain until we finally arrive back at the kangaroos and have completed our tour. Well, after doing this for half an hour, I probably don't have to prove to anyone that Nuremberg Zoo has a lot to offer. The somewhat controversial highlights are certainly the dolphins and maybe the manatees, but the animal collection here has also a lot more to offer, especially when it comes to mammals, which are particularly abundant here. There may not be many monkeys, but there are all the more hoofed animals, which makes sense for such a large zoo. And in addition to some partly also historically exciting facilities and enclosures, the real star for me is the natural parkway. I just love spending time here and think that the animal observations are also enhanced by the surrounding nature in many places. In some places, modernization could certainly bring out even more for both animals and visitors. But even so, Nuremberg Zoo is one of the most beautiful zoos in Germany and deserves even more international recognition. Although the park has already over 1 million visitors a year, so I don't think I need to worry here. So please let me know, did you already have Nuremberg Zoo on your radar? And especially if not, what is your impression after watching this video? But of course, please let me also know what you think of Nuremberg Zoo if you have visited the park before. Whew. Oh, I have to say I'm quite exhausted after this long recording session. My German video from 2021 was only 11 minutes long, so I guess I've come a long way, even though this English channel is still relatively new. So if you haven't already, press the subscribe button. This is only just the start. Also, give the video a thumbs up, and I will now go to sleep. Goodbye, see you soon, or as we say in Germany, auf Wiedersehen und gute Nacht. Yours truly, Martin.